All right, buckle up everyone, because today we're diving deep into the world of automotive legends. We're talking about the cars and trucks that shaped history, and we've got our roadmap right here. J.H. McIntosh's Autosopedia, Every Auto.
And every auto it is. What's fascinating about McIntosh's approach is that he doesn't just list the vehicles, he digs into the why, the engineering, the cultural impact. It's like a cultural anthropology of cars.
I like that. So where do we even start with something as massive as every car?
Well, McIntosh breaks it down into categories for us, thankfully, and he kicks things off with a category we can all appreciate. Global icons. These are the heavy hitters, the ones you've probably ridden in, or at least seen on every continent.
Okay, so we're talking household names here. What's first on the list?
Well, you can't talk about global icons without mentioning the Toyota Corolla. I mean, this car is practically ubiquitous.
Yeah, it's like the definition of a car, right?
Yeah.
Like if you close your eyes and picture a car, it's probably a Corolla.
And that's kind of the point. What Autosopedia points out is that the Corolla's success isn't about being flashy or particularly groundbreaking. It's about being reliable, affordable, and adaptable. It's thrived in so many different markets because it just works.
It's like that pair of jeans you can always count on.
Yeah.
Speaking of dependable, we've got another icon on the list that's about as American as apple pie and baseball. The Ford F-150.
Ah, the F-150, the workhorse that became a status symbol. What's interesting is how Autosopedia traces this evolution. It wasn't just about marketing, though, that played a part. It was about how the truck's design became this blank canvas for personalization.
Yeah, like you can trick out an F-150 to be anything you want it to be.
Exactly. And that really tapped into the American spirit of individuality and, let's be honest, our love affair with trucks.
Can't argue with that. Okay, from trucks to, well, something a bit smaller. Autosopedia puts the Volkswagen Beetle in the global icons category, and it's not hard to see why.
The Beetle is fascinating because it's one of those rare vehicles that transcended its initial purpose. It was designed to be the simple, affordable car for the masses.
Which it was, for a time, but then it became something.
Yeah. Right. Autosopedia talks about how it was embraced by the counterculture movement, becoming a symbol of peace, love, and individuality. Ironically, it became cool because it wasn't trying to be cool.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? Okay, so we've got reliable, we've got customizable, we've got counterculture. What other global icons does McIntosh have up his sleeve?
Well, we're talking about cars that have shaped the world, and it's hard to think of a vehicle that's had a bigger impact on off-roading than the Jeep Wrangler.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Wrangler is practically synonymous with adventure, right?
Exactly. And Autosopedia really digs into the Wrangler's design, pointing out how its roots trace all the way back to World War II Jeeps. That rugged, almost bare bones aesthetic is a direct link to its military heritage, and I think that's a big part of its appeal.
It's like it's got a story to tell before you even get behind the wheel. And speaking of off-roading royalty, we've got to talk about the Land Rover Defender. It's like the Wrangler's sophisticated British cousin, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Autosopedia talks about how the Defender was initially designed for agricultural use. Can you imagine? And yet its go anywhere, do anything capability turned it into a favorite of explorers, adventurers, even royalty.
It's a reminder that sometimes the best designs are the ones that are built to last. Okay, so we've covered some serious ground here, but these are just the global icons. What other categories is Autosopedia taking us through on this automotive adventure?
Well, from the globally recognized, we're moving into the realm of game changers. These are the vehicles that didn't just meet needs, they reinvented the rule book. And we'll start with one that's all about luxury and innovation. The Mercedes-Benz S-Class.
They don't call it the S-Class for nothing, like it sets the standard.
Exactly. And Autosopedia is careful to point out that it wasn't just about plush seats and fancy trim. The S-Class was a pioneer in safety features, often introducing tech that later became standard in other cars. Did you know it was one of the first cars to offer anti-lock brakes and airbags as standard equipment?
No way! Talk about ahead of its time. Okay, from luxury to, well, something completely different. Autosopedia puts the Volkswagen Bus in the game changers category, and I have to admit, I'm intrigued.
Ah, the VW bus, the quintessential symbol of freedom and adventure. What Autosopedia highlights is how its design, affordability, and spaciousness made it the perfect vehicle for a generation looking to break free from convention. It was more than just a mode of transportation, it was a statement.
It's incredible how a vehicle can become so intertwined with a cultural movement. Like, it's not just about getting from point A to point B, it's about a shared ethos.
Exactly. And speaking of vehicles that tap into a particular lifestyle, the Subaru Outback is a fascinating example of how a car can capture a very specific vibe.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's like they took the best parts of a station wagon and an SUV, threw in some all-wheel drive, and said, let's go find an adventure.
And Autosopedia points out that their marketing campaigns really played into that image, appealing to people who wanted to escape the everyday, even if it was just for a weekend getaway. And it worked. The Outback became synonymous with an active, outdoorsy lifestyle.
It's like the car equivalent of a good pair of hiking boots. Practical, but ready for anything. Okay, before we get too sidetracked by our wanderlust, we've got another game changer to talk about. And this one's a big one, especially in today's world. The Toyota Prius.
Ah, the Prius. You can't talk about game changers without mentioning the car that essentially made hybrid technology mainstream. When it was first introduced, it was this quirky, almost futuristic-looking car that was known more for its fuel efficiency than its looks.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly turning heads at the stoplight. But then, something interesting happened.
It became cool to care about the environment. Okay, it's maybe not cool in the traditional sense, but Autosopedia talks about how the Prius became a symbol of environmental consciousness. People bought it because they wanted to make a statement about their values.
It's like it became a badge of honor to be seen driving a car that sipped fuel instead of guzzling it. Okay, from the fuel-efficient to the, shall we say, slightly thirstier side of things, Autosopedia also dives into the world of performance legends. And we're talking icons here.
We're talking about the cars that get your heart racing just by looking at them. And Autosopedia kicks off this category with two legendary names, the Porsche 911 and the Chevrolet Corvette.
Oh man, talk about a clash of the titans. You've got German engineering versus American muscle. What does Macintosh have to say about these two?
Well, with the 911, it's all about that rear-engine layout. Autosopedia points out that this distinctive design element has been a hallmark of the 911 since day one and has contributed to its incredible handling and performance.
It's like it's defying the laws of physics or something.
In a way, it is. And then you've got the Corvette, often called America's sports car. It's always represented this incredible blend of power and attainability. Autosopedia argues that its performance capabilities became a point of national pride, with the Corvette often going head-to-head with European exotics.
It's like the underdog that could and often did come out on top. Okay, but no conversation about legendary performance cars is complete without mentioning the Ferrari 250 GTO. I mean, this is a car that's practically mythical.
Ah, the 250 GTO, the holy grail for car collectors. Only 36 were ever made, which just adds to its mystique. Autosopedia talks about how its design, this perfect blend of elegance and aggression, was inspired by Ferrari's racing heritage. This wasn't just a car, it was a statement.
And a very expensive statement at that. I've heard those things fetch astronomical prices at auction, but for sheer audacity, for that look-at-me factor, you can't beat the Lamborghini Miura.
The Miura is often credited with being the world's first supercar, and its influence on the genre is undeniable. Autosopedia points to its mid-engine layout and jaw-dropping design by Marcello Gandini as key factors in its enduring appeal. It was a car that was as much about making a statement as it was about performance.
It's amazing how one car can have such a lasting impact on an entire genre. But you know, for a car that spoke to the rebel in all of us, that captured the spirit of freedom and youthful rebellion, it's hard to beat the Ford Mustang.
The Mustang is a classic example of a car tapping into the zeitgeist, wouldn't you say? It was aspirational yet attainable, and Autosopedia argues that its success lay in its ability to connect with a generation yearning for self-expression.
Plus, it didn't hurt that it looked fantastic on screen. Who could forget Steve McQueen racing through the streets of San Francisco in Bullitt?
Pure cinematic magic, and the perfect example of how a car can become more than just a machine. It can become an icon.
Okay, before we burn rubber all the way to the finish line, we've got a lot more ground to cover from Autosopedia's list. What say we take a pit stop and come back to explore some of the unsung heroes of the automotive world? The affordable and accessible.
Sounds good to me. These are the cars that prove you don't need a trust fund to experience the joy of driving.
All right, so we're back, engines revving, and ready to explore the cars that prove you don't need a celebrity paycheck to get behind the wheel of something great. Autosopedia calls this next category affordable and accessible. And they're kicking things off with a vehicle that's practically legendary for its toughness.
The Toyota Hilux?
Oh, the Hilux. This is the little truck that could and did and still does. Autosopedia points out that it's hugely popular in developing countries because it can handle some serious punishment. Remember that episode of Top Gear where they tried to destroy one?
Oh man, that was insane. They drove it into a river, set it on fire. I mean, they tried everything to kill that thing. And it just kept going. It's a testament to Toyota's engineering, but it also speaks to a need for vehicles that are built to last, especially in parts of the world where resources are scarce.
It's like the anti-disposable car. Speaking of dependable, we've got another workhorse on the list, but this one's more likely to be found in a school carpool lane than on a mountainside. The Honda CR-V.
The CR-V is a great example of how a car can be both practical and well-engineered. It consistently gets top marks for reliability, which is a big deal for people who need a vehicle that just works day in and day out.
Yeah, it's like the Honda Accord of the SUV world. You know what you're getting, and you know it's going to be good. Okay, from a family hauler to something a bit more, shall we say, sophisticated. Autosopedia includes the Volkswagen Jetta in this category, and I think that's a great call.
The Jetta has always had this grown-up feel to it, even though it's considered an entry-level car by a lot of folks. Autosopedia talks about how it offered that touch of European styling and engineering that made it feel a bit more special than its competitors.
Like, it wasn't just trying to be the cheapest car on the lot, it was trying to offer something a bit more refined.
Exactly. And that resonated with a lot of buyers who were looking for a step up from the ordinary without breaking the bank. And speaking of offering a bit more, the Ford Escape kind of kicked off the whole compact SUV craze, didn't it?
Oh, for sure. It was like the SUV for people who didn't want a big, bulky SUV.
Autosopedia talks about how the Escape really hit that sweet spot between car-like handling and SUV versatility, making it a hit with drivers who wanted the best of both worlds. It was practical, relatively affordable, and had a bit of style. What more could you ask for?
Speaking of style, Hyundai has really stepped up their game in recent years. I remember when they were known for just being, well, cheap. But the Hyundai Elantra proves they're not messing around anymore.
Absolutely. The Elantra marked a turning point for Hyundai in terms of design and quality. They started offering features and a level of refinement that rivaled more established brands, but they managed to do it while still keeping their cars affordable.
Yeah, it's like they finally realized they could compete on more than just price, and they haven't looked back since. Now, for a car that's been a stalwart in the affordable and reliable category for what feels like forever, the Nissan Altima deserves a spot on this list for sure.
The Altima is one of those cars that just consistently delivers. Autosopedia mentions how it's always been known for its comfortable ride and spacious interior, making it a popular choice for families and commuters alike. It's not flashy or particularly exciting, but it's a solid, dependable car, and sometimes that's all you need.
Sometimes you just want a car that starts every morning and gets you where you need to go without any fuss. But, sometimes you want a little bit of fuss, a little bit of personality in your ride. And for that, you can't beat the Kia Soul.
The Soul is a great example of how a car can be both affordable and expressive. Its boxy design is definitely unique, and Autosopedia talks about how it really appealed to younger buyers who wanted something different, something that stood out from the crowd.
It's like the automotive equivalent of a pair of funky sneakers. You're not just buying a car, you're buying a statement. And speaking of statements, the Toyota RAV4 has been making a statement about practicality and reliability for decades now.
The RAV4 is another one of those vehicles that just consistently delivers. Autosopedia points out that it was one of the first compact crossovers, and it's continued to be a global bestseller because it ticks all the boxes. It's reliable, it's practical, it's fuel efficient, and it's relatively affordable.
It's like the Goldilocks of cars. Not too big, not too small, not too expensive, just right. Okay, from the sensible to the, well, let's be honest, the seriously cool. Autosopedia throws a curveball by including the Datsun 240Z in the affordable and accessible category.
The 240Z is a perfect example of how a car can be both affordable and aspirational. Autosopedia calls it a game changer because it made sports car performance accessible to the masses. It was stylish, it was fun to drive, and it was surprisingly affordable.
It's still a head-turner today. Okay, we can't talk about affordable and accessible without mentioning the vehicle that revolutionized family transportation, the minivan. Autosopedia gives the nod to the Chrysler minivan as the pioneer of the segment.
Love it or hate it, there's no denying the impact the minivan has had on how families get around. Autosopedia actually points out that it was the Dodge Caravan that came first, but the Chrysler minivans quickly followed suit, and they all just took off in popularity. It was like they were designed by parents, for parents.
Upholders for everyone. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, from rugged trucks to family-friendly minivans. And Autosopedia isn't done with us yet. Next up, we're buckling up for a ride on the luxurious side. Get ready to experience automotive opulence because we're moving on to the category that screams high-end, luxury, and prestige.
We're talking about the cars that make a statement just by pulling up to the curb.
All right, we're shifting gears now from practicality and affordability to the realm of pure automotive indulgence. Autosopedia calls this category luxury and prestige, and it's a lineup that reads like a who's who of high-end automakers.
We're talking about the cars that whisper rather than shout, the ones that exude an air of effortless superiority. And they don't get much more prestigious than the Rolls-Royce Phantom.
I mean, the name alone conjures up images of old-world elegance and sophistication. What makes the Phantom so special, according to Macintosh?
Well, it's funny because you might expect Autosopedia to focus on, horsepower in 0 to 60 times, but with the Phantom, it's all about the craftsmanship. Like, did you know that the paint they use is mixed by hand to match the owner's specific desires?
No way. That's incredible. It's like they're not just building a car, they're creating a work of art.
Exactly. And speaking of art, the Bentley Continental GT is another vehicle that combines performance with a certain artistic flair. But it's not just about looks with this one.
Oh, I know. I've heard those things can really move.
Autosopedia describes it as a grand tourer, meaning it's designed for, well, grand touring long, luxurious drives on winding roads. But it's got a heart of a lion under the hood, too.
It's like that friend who's effortlessly stylish and also secretly a black belt in karate. Okay, from sophisticated power to, well, something a bit more iconic, Autosopedia includes the Aston Martin DB5 in this category. And come on, who doesn't love a good spy car?
The DB5 is a perfect example of how a car can become bigger than just a car. Autosopedia argues that its popularity wasn't just about its looks, although it's a stunning car. It was about what it represented: adventure, intrigue, a certain license to thrill. Thanks, James Bond.
I mean, that car is practically a character in those movies.
Okay, let's jump from suave spies to something a bit more rugged, shall we? Autosopedia includes the Mercedes-Benz G-Class in the luxury and prestige category, and I've got to admit, I'm a little bit surprised by this one. The G-Wagon is an interesting one because it's a vehicle that has really transcended its initial purpose. It started out as this hardcore off-roader designed for, military use and serious adventurers. But then, something funny happened.
It became like the it car for celebrities and soccer moms.
Exactly. And Autosopedia points out that Mercedes-Benz leaned into that versatility, offering a range of models from the bare bones to the downright luxurious. It's like, do you want heated seats with your mud tires? We've got you covered.
It's the best of both worlds. Okay, from the surprisingly versatile to the undeniably American, we've got to talk about the Cadillac Eldorado. That car just screams classic American luxury.
The Eldorado is a great example of how car design often reflects the cultural moment it was born into. Autosopedia talks about how its extravagant use of chrome, those massive tail fins, all of it just screamed post-war optimism and exuberance. It was the automotive equivalent of the American dream.
Bigger was definitely better back then. Okay, for a slightly more understated take on American luxury, the Lincoln Continental has always held a special place in my heart.
The Continental was all about elegance and sophistication. It wasn't flashy or ostentatious, but it had this presence, this quiet confidence that commanded respect. Autosopedia calls it a favorite of presidents and captains of industry, and I can definitely see why.
It's like the strong, silent type of the car world. Now, we can't talk about luxury and prestige without mentioning a car that's often called one of the most beautiful ever made, the Jaguar E-Type.
Oh, the E-Type. Even Enzo Ferrari himself called it the most beautiful car ever made. That's high praise coming from, well, Enzo Ferrari. Autosopedia talks about how its design, those long, flowing lines, combined with its powerful engine, made it an instant classic.
It's one of those cars that even today you see it on the road and you just have to stop and stare. Okay, from British elegance to Japanese innovation, when Lexus launched the LS, they were taking direct aim at the established luxury brands, and they weren't afraid to shake things up.
The Lexus LS was a revelation when it debuted. Autosopedia talks about how it offered a level of quality, refinement, and reliability that really challenged the German dominance in the luxury car market.
It was like they took everything they'd learned from making Toyotas, which were already known for their reliability, and dialed it up to 11. And speaking of shaking things up, we can't talk about innovation in the luxury market without mentioning Tesla. The Model S, their flagship sedan, pretty much single-handedly made electric cars cool.
The Model S was a game changer, no doubt about it. Autosopedia argues that it shattered the perception that electric cars had to be slow, boring, or impractical. It had blistering acceleration, a sleek, futuristic design, and surprisingly good range. It forced the established automakers to take electric vehicles seriously.
It was like a shot across the bow of the entire automotive industry. And for a car that proves you don't need to spend six figures to experience a touch of that Audi magic, the A4 has been a perennial favorite among drivers who appreciate a balance of performance, style, and affordability.
The A4 is a great example of how Audi has managed to bring that premium look and feel to a more accessible price point. Autosopedia highlights its sporty handling, its well-crafted interior, and its overall refinement as key selling points.
It's like the gateway drug to the world of German luxury cars. Okay, Autosopedia takes us on quite the ride through the world of luxury and prestige, showcasing the vehicles that have become synonymous with automotive excellence. But before we wrap up our deep dive into Autosopedia, Macintosh leaves us with a final thought, a question to ponder as we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of the automotive world. If the cars we drive are a reflection of who we are and what we value, what will the cars of the future say about us? Will they prioritize sustainability, performance, connectivity, or something else entirely? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure,